Okay, hey everybody, welcome. I'm Sean Bradley with the Green Room, and today we are joined by Kaitlin Shaw from PR Casting here in Chicago. She's been with PR since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay, hey everybody, welcome.
I'm
Sean Bradley.
Just a second. I have to not have my volume on. This thing. Apologize. That's our delay. But she's been with PR for since about 2021 and has done a fair amount of casting in New York City as well for 11 so odd years at Tara Rubin Casting, and has a lot of experience in theater as well as TV and film, which I think is kind of a unique angle. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit. The chat on YouTube is open. If people want to throw stuff in the chat there, we'll be taking questions, but probably want to save your questions until a little bit later because we might wind up answering them as we go along here. And we'll open up the questions more towards the end. So if your question shows up more towards the end, it's more likely that I will see it. And then we're also joined on the actual Zoom call by some actors from our membership group, The Practice. If any of you are out there and you're with The Practice, please save your questions until our breakout session after the live stream meeting so that we can let everybody on YouTube to have priority during this stuff. Okay, so everybody on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the like button and all that great stuff. There's a bell in there. I have no idea what it does, but just push buttons while we get to talking. So welcome, Kaitlin. Super good to see you.
Thanks so much. You too, Sean.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into casting? Why casting?
Absolutely. Yes. And I do apologize for my.
Muted. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Let me know. Good.
Yes.
Okay, great. I do apologize for my wonky lighting. We were trying to fix this strobe effect we have going on and just, stop trying. So yes, how I got into casting, as Sean mentioned, I worked in New York at Tara Rubin Casting for 11 years before moving to Chicago. And now I've been with PR about a year and a half. I studied theater in college, always knew I'd probably do something other than performing. I did a double major with American Studies, just kind of trying to diversify my studies. I kind of started having an eye towards casting towards the end of college. I had done some internships during college, one in general management at a company in the West End in London, and they general managed a lot of shows in the West End. And then I did a company management internship in San Diego at La Jolla Playhouse. And those two experiences together kind of started, me thinking about casting. I loved being able to interact with actors during the process, but I did also like the kind of more administrative side that general management, really showed me. So by end of college, I was applying for internships in New York, got an internship the fall after I graduated at Tara Rubin's office, and was very lucky to roll my internship into an assistant job, and then moved up there and was eventually a casting director there for the last few years I was there. So yeah, that's kind of the story.
That's fantastic. And what type of work did you focus on at Tara Rubin Casting?
Largely musical theater. Yeah, we did pretty much all theater there, some TV and film projects, but really it would be a TV or film project that had to do with, a theater project, like working on the Les Mis movie or Tara Cast, the producer's movie. Or we would do searches for TV shows for dancers, or usually things that were specific to, our theater background. We did a lot of straight plays. We did all of the casting for Yale Rep while I was there, and a lot for Westport Country Playhouse, places like that. I did work a lot more on the musicals, worked on things like Phantom, Flashdance, a wide range of musicals, just to name a few. But that mostly was my focus while I was there.
And what was the path to PR casting?
Yeah, so I moved here end of February 2020. I was 7 months pregnant. And then, as you all know, COVID hit March 2020. So I had a baby during COVID. I was home with her the whole first year. And it was spring 2021 that PR was working on. I think they had 6 different TV shows all at once because it was everything, came back after COVID all at once. And they were doing Shining Girls and 61st Street and South Side and Joe Parrott. They had a million things happening all at once. So they were looking for a part-time assistant. And I saw the job. And even having been a casting director in New York, I've never worked in TV, film, or commercials at all. So I said, this is a great opportunity for me to see what that is like, what it's like to do a deal memo. I've never done any of that kind of paperwork. So I started working with them part-time April 2021. And then they asked me to come on full-time July that year. So kind of just made the transition to TV, film, and commercials with them, and have been able to cast a handful of theater projects for them as well. And I'm working on one right now. So that's been nice to be able to continue doing some of that there.
That's fantastic. And what sort of similarities or what sort of differences do you wind up seeing?
I do think the similarities is, I mean, this sounds so obvious, but we're always looking for the best person. And whether best person means best person that fits exactly what we wanted this role to be or what our creative team wanted the role to be, or the best person meaning someone that was totally different from that, but came in and nailed the audition. And now we have to have them in the show. And I feel like that happens in theater, film, commercials, TV. Like if you come in and give the best audition of the day, it's really hard not to argue that that is the person who should get that part, or at least move on in the process for the part. I think that obviously there are different skills needed in all of these areas, but I absolutely think most actors can easily do all 4 if we're talking about theater, TV, commercial, film. I do not think like any one actor needs to just stick to one. You may be more successful at one, or you may be only getting called back for commercials for a run or theater for a while. But I do think your skills are very, interchangeable. And that was good to kind of just see right away, starting there. Okay, my basic casting experience and skills and knowledge absolutely translates to this. It's only the intricacies of the style or the deal memos and all of the administrative stuff that we handle that I didn't ever have to do in theater that I've gotten now up to speed on.
Right. Yeah. And I think far too many actors trick themselves into thinking, oh, I'm not right for TV, or I'm not right for theater, or whatever it might be. And I actually got a chance to work with some just lovely theater artists over the pandemic, because they're like, I want something to do. And it was really cool to see them open their eyes to the fact that they were fantastic on camera as well. Just wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, used to be even how we would break it down in theater, like straight theater versus musicals versus opera. I mean, there's a lot of different variations just within theater of people who think, oh, I could never do that kind of show, or I could never do that kind of show. And I think, if you put yourself out there and, try and are game for it, you'll be surprised that you might be better at it than you think.
So what is the situation with, so actually I talked to you today, and you're actually working on a theater project now, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And does that, do you get now the theater stuff at PR Casting? They're like, oh, we'll give that to Kaitlin for sure.
It has been that way.
Or do people kind of hear it? Do people kind of, is everybody working on everything, or do people kind of like, this is your project for right now, this is your project for right now?
I think ideally for Mickey and Jennifer, in their ideal world, every project that came in, Mickey, Jennifer, AJ, and I would all get to work on. I think like we all take projects that we're excited about, that it would be like all 4 of us want to dig into that. And I think it often comes down to just like time and availability, who actually might take the lead on one of those. Even just commercials, it just comes down to scheduling, like who is going to be running that callback that day, who does it make sense to have them dedicated to that, time period. For the theater projects, I've done 3 musicals so far that have come in through PR, and they were all at really busy times where it was like, we can take this on, but it's going to be like Kaitlin's project, like you're going to be running with it. This one we have coming up, that's Personality, that's going to be a brand new musical that's premiering in Chicago at the Studebaker Theater kind of came in, and Jennifer and Mickey and AJ were all like, yeah, we're really jazzed about this. Let's all work on this together. Our callbacks are coming up with the creative team week after next. And I think it'll kind of end up being one of those availability things of whether all four of us will be there every day. I will be the person in the room every day, and they will come in as much as they can. So yeah, I think that is something that's really fun and collaborative about PR specifically, that like Mickey and Jen and AJ and I work on lots of things together. It's not like this is AJ's project and this is Mickey's project. And that way we all get to kind of have our hands in everything.
Yeah, it's got to make it more fun. I mean,
yeah,
social is good.
Right.
As we know. So throughout the pandemic, I think a lot of people have been tuned into, the self-tape possibilities for TV and film and everything. So a lot of actors, I've had this conversation with a lot of actors that are like, I want to tap into other markets. But honestly, it seems like that's been, in some ways, at least through the agent casting pathway, more accessible for theater. When you were out in New York, were you seeing people from other markets across the country? Or how did that work? Or was that not really such a...
It was, we would put out audition appointments, and if it came back from the agent, oh, this person is on a national tour or they're out doing a gig, wherever they are, but they can be in New York for callbacks, we would gladly take a tape from that person and view it kind of as a pre-screen for us, but they have to audition live in person in New York for callbacks, if it came to that.
Right.
And it was never like fathomable to me that we would be doing dance auditions, via self-tape, or even singing auditions where they're doing their own tracks and singing to their own tracks. And I think with COVID and all the virtual auditions, that just happened, and people started working with their own tracks, or creative teams started providing tracks so that actors could, sing along to that at home. And yeah, the self-tape theater audition world has really come full circle, where that's a big part of the process now. That I think now it's really only once we're at the callback process and we've whittled down, the list to our, our favorites, however many that is for the role, that we're doing in person for theater.
Wow. That's wild to hear. Because I think we all know that the first round of auditions on most everything on camera is, heavily been through self-tape still, but
sure.
Even in theater. Yeah. Wow. Does it seem like that's going to be forward too, even for theater?
I wonder, because I think creative teams are doing it because they're kind of forced to be doing it now, because a lot of the equity calls are still virtual now. Starting next month, January 2023, they're moving back to doing equity calls in person. So I think actors are largely happy about that. I think creative teams are largely happy about that too. It means that they need to sometimes travel and, be in the physical room for those auditions. But I think creative teams are excited about getting back in the room and kind of doing the process in person from the start, as much as possible. So it sounds like 2023, really led with the equity policies changing. We're going to be back in the room earlier.
That's
for theater.
Great. What is, as more of an on-camera performer, what are the rules in the equity world in terms of the generals? Don't you have to you have to put it on Equity's website? It has to be open to, how does that all work? And how does that affect a casting director's position in that? Are you involved in the general stuff too, or does the theater do their own generals and then you do the specific searches?
Yeah, we are required to hold equity calls before having any other kind of auditions for our shows. And that's if it's a musical, it's a EPA principal audition, a singer's audition, and a dancer's audition. And yeah, in my experience, when I've done an equity show here and, in New York, it was the casting office that was not running those, because equity would technically run them and plan them, but then we would be there. We would be the one, going through all the people, deciding who we were going to call back, etc. And then for us, for our long running Broadway shows, it was required that you do those every 6 months. So you're doing those open calls, even if there are no available jobs, every 6 months. And we really, loved having to do that, honestly, because it gave us an opportunity to kind of make a file, like we called it. And then when, someone gives notice in a show, we can go back to our files and look at the pile of resumes that we've kind of been stacking for this specific spot. So it's useful to us. My experience doing them in Chicago is a little so far less useful because we're really looking to hire local Chicago actors. We can't specify that through equity. It needs to be open to anyone who wants to audition. So I am getting a lot of submissions from people who live all around the country, when really I'm then whittling to what I'm really looking for, which is local Chicago actors or actors who at least can be Chicago local hires.
So that's what desperately waiting for it to go back to in person.
A little bit, because if they're here in Chicago, you have a better idea that they actually live here and they didn't likely travel in. So that is part of it, that opening it up virtually does allow for, people that, aren't, exactly going to end up being like contenders because of a lot of times location, but other things as well. That's kind of the requirements. And then part of the process that kind of changes for us too is we actually have to give 2 weeks notice for those notices going out and posting saying, hey, we're holding these equity calls. So there's like a 2-week waiting period between putting that notice out and then those auditions, the calls actually taking place. So it always, we just have to factor in that 2-week, time period into our schedule. It's not like, hey, we can't start auditions next week. We need those 2 weeks of buffer time. So that's always something we have to be aware of.
Wow. Yeah, definitely different process. What for self-tapes for theater, is there a different routine for the actor, different standards? Like, do we frame wider and talk louder, or what's the
I think it is. Yes, I do think framing wider usually because it is thinking about more what we're going to see you looking like on stage, or at least in an audition room and not on camera. So it usually is, we do want it to be a little bit wider. This seems obvious, but for dance auditions, the framing really has to be full body in that we have to be able to see your feet. We have a lot of dance auditions that come in, their knees up, and the choreographer really can't tell anything about technique if they're not seeing your feet. One thing I noticed a lot, and this happened when it was in the room too, and I was always telling people, don't look me in the eye and give me straight eye contact and sing your song to me. In self-tapes, people seem to be looking down the barrel of the camera and singing their song right in to the camera. And when I'm watching that back, it comes across as you are looking right at me. And it is an uncomfortable, like, almost obtrusive feeling, even when it is a self-tape. So that's another thing that I would say is give yourself a point of focus that is not, straight into the camera. Other than that, I think people like to make their self-tapes perfect, but I think actually we're a little more forgiving on this end than you would think on like the tech aspects of it, the lighting, like my situation I have right now, or even sound. It's still, for theater, it is a jumping off point. It is a point to like get us interested in you and your talent. And then like the ideal next step would be to see you in the room. So we know it's not the final idealized performance. It's a jumping off point.
Absolutely. And I think I've had this conversation with actors a lot, and I think they sometimes stress so much about their background, like, oh my gosh, I can see the skis over on the side there, but if I want to be in a wide shot in front of my backdrop, so they wind up cutting themselves off at the knees, as opposed to being able to do that full body shot. Like a full body shot stresses actors out more than anything in the world right now, I think.
I know.
But it's good to hear from your voice that it's fine. We don't need the perfect setup as long as we can see you and hear you.
No, and I think people think that thing in the background is going to be distracting from my performance. Sometimes it's like the thing that makes us remember you a little bit, like, oh yeah, the guy that had the pile of laundry. It's not like the thing that discounts you. It's like sometimes the thing that makes you stand out. Not to say you should then set up scenarios to stand out, but it shows some personality and some part of you that is more than just you being an actor robot. And we do know you are most likely in your home and dealing with, situation, pets, children, partners. We are aware of that.
all next week, Mickey, Jen, and AJ are going to be like, why does everybody have a pile of laundry in the back of their
No,
frame?
I'm like, that's me.
That's, you guys said that one. What else? So typical questions that actors are probably going to ask there. So I'll try to beat some people to the punch on the chat. How do we best get on your radar if we've never been into PR or an actor that has some experience, maybe even an agent, and we feel like they've been submitting this? How do we get on your radar?
I mean, I do think the main way we learn about actors is through agents. And I do think we listen to agents who say, we just signed this new great person. We'd love it if you want to see them for this commercial, that you guys have going on that we just noticed. But I think either agents or referrals, someone we know who taught a class or was in a class with someone else and said like, oh, I just saw this great person and you might not be familiar with them. Like we listen to all of that stuff. It means obviously a little extra more than just having you, the actor, submit your resume and, a cover letter or email, whatever you're sending to us. We get lots of those, right? So, what is it that's going to make you stand out? And then obviously just getting in and doing one audition for us and standing out in one audition is hopefully going to get you noticed and remembered, and that will get the ball rolling. But I do think compared to working in New York, where we had those equity calls and we had open calls constantly, and I was meeting new people through those calls, here that's not happening as much. So I do think, I wouldn't have said this in New York, that it is, I think, a priority or should be a priority to be working with an agent who can submit you and push you. I do think that is more helpful in Chicago. Just so you have a better chance of, getting on our radar. It's not necessary, but I think it is a big plus. But Mickey especially responds to those cold emails and those, specific, I loved The Bear so much because I've been working in restaurants my whole life and, I would love to audition. Like she's going to remember something like that. I'm going to remember something like that. But Mickey, if any of you know her, she takes to those stories and just loves actors so much that she's going to remember things like that. So it's always worth sending those emails, writing those letters, doing those reach outs, and really having something specific to say is going to be the thing that kind of pushes it over and is noticed by us.
That's great. Let me back up to theater stuff a little bit and the equity generals, because if people are devious and see the hack that, oh, I could go to a general audition for this theater thing because this casting director is also casting The Bear, but I'm totally not right for this theater thing. Am I going to totally tick you off submitting myself on something that I'm just not reasonably right for and taking up a space?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I always got this question when I was working at Tara's office, because we would be holding these calls all the time. So people would say, what do you think about me coming into a Jersey Boys audition? But I know I'm not really right for Jersey Boys, but I want you to see me for Les Mis. And I would say, yes, we are always thinking of all of our projects when we're seeing actors, and when we love someone, we get excited and are like, oh, we should try them for that. And that part of our brain is also always working, but we are there to serve the client. And when I'm in an audition for Personality, the musical, I have my tracks that I know I'm looking. And if you walk in the room and you are just nowhere on the breakdown and not right at all, I'm not going to go, oh, they did a smart thing and they came in because they want to see me because they know I cast a bear. I'm going to go, why are they here? And what do they possibly think they're right for in this show? You're not helping yourself there as much as you think you are. I think you need to only audition for things that you are moderately somewhat appropriate for and available for, and honestly would do if it was offered to you. Do not audition for things that you are not available for or that you would turn down. That will just piss us off, honestly, and not get you on our list to see for other things. So that's definitely something, to be aware of.
Yes, I used to be a casting director over at O'Connor Casting, so I have that experience too, and I can't stress enough for actors to understand there's very little that you can do in an audition as far as your performance goes. Like you can suck terribly and it's not going to piss anybody off, and it's not going to make them not like you, and it's not going to make them not call you in again, because some roles just don't work with some people. But business decisions of putting a casting director in a position of presenting you to a client that likes you and then you saying something I can't do, that's not good.
Yeah. And I've heard of actors will come to me and say, my agent is telling me I should audition for this, even though I don't want to do that, but because it's this casting office. And I'm like, your agent is wrong. Like
No.
you are going to burn some bridges if you do that. If you show up to an audition, you are telling me you want this job, really. And that's the only thing I should be like thinking while you're in there, not, what are their other ulterior motives?
For sure. I had another question that somebody asked that was very similar. Some people have sent in some questions beforehand. Maria sent in asking similarly, if we are with an agent, if we have been into PR casting, but it's been a year, where are we at then? What should we do if we feel like, oh, I've been submitted and it's kind of dipped in terms of the level of interest? What are some reasonable steps that an actor can do to try to get back on radar?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first conversation is more in depth with your agent, and I think your agent works for you, and you should be able to ask them, hey, can you show me all of the projects that you submitted me for PR casting in which they didn't call me in? Is this a story you're telling yourself, or is there definitive proof of like, oh, here's 10 commercials that my agent did submit me for PR casting and I didn't get called in for any of those? Okay, I'm going to now move forward with this knowledge of like, there's some reason why they're not calling me in, because I just wonder if you actually go to your agent and lay that out, if that actually is going to come back as true, or if it's just something that kind of gets created in our mind, and maybe that you discover there's an issue with agents submitting you for everything you're right for, or something like that. Other than that, I mean, I think again, your agent works for you. I feel like there's a lot less pushing from agents in Chicago than was in New York, than happened in New York. I think every project we did in New York, we would get the submissions, we would put out maybe the first round of appointments, and then we would get all of the people from the agents that they said, hey, these are people who didn't get appointments that I really think you should take a look at. I don't get that as much here in Chicago, and we like it when we get that. So I think it might be on you to say to your agent, I felt great about my last few auditions with PR casting. I haven't seen them in a while. Is there a possibility you can send them an email and say, this person would really like to come in for you guys again? We're nice, like people who are just looking to cast the best person for the job. I really think if we got an email like that, we'd be like, oh yeah, we should try that person, and if we don't, there might be then some feedback we give to the agent at that point saying, oh, the last time they were in, this happened, and this is why we've kind of held off on them for a little while. That's a good opportunity, I think, to, maybe get some answers about that. But again, maybe I'm deflecting and putting it on the agents, but I think like, make sure your data is correct before, going into that conversation with your agent.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's good to hear you say that. When I was casting, it was clearly years and years ago, and it was very commercial. So I think on commercials, people don't get that many pushes from agents anyway. But I had always said, yeah, agents, I always blew my mind how infrequently we would get calls from agents. And I've talked to many agents doing webinars like this over the many months that we've been doing these. And they've always said, oh yeah, we push people a lot. And I'm like, it's interesting to hear that it's not as much as in other markets.
I don't see it a lot. Yeah.
But maybe not as much as they are allowed to.
And it's high volume. Agents might be dealing with 20, 30 appointments, and they don't want to add 10 more to that. I understand the reasons for it. What we really love is agents who say, these 5 people you called in aren't available. How about these 5 people? Because if we lost 5 people, we probably are going to want 5 to replace them with, so those are the kind of things that, it's a little more give and take. And
Sure.
I think agents don't want to be pushy, and they don't want to be annoying. And there definitely are agents that come off that way, but even if they are, we know they're advocating for their client and they're working hard for their client, and that's what you guys deserve.
Yeah. And that is a good point. Chicago is very much always has been a high volume market as opposed to, the big ticket priced item markets where the agent can make a good buck in a day versus we got to crank out a lot of stuff. So they're notably swamped.
Yeah.
Throughout the day. Yeah. What is the timeline for your casting process? Like how long? You said you have to be putting up the first equity call at least 2 weeks before you're going to do that call. So you've got to have that conversation. But then what happens after that?
I mean, and that is specifically an equity project. So,
Sure.
I did 3 musicals before this, 2 that were at the Apollo, 1 that was at Mercury that were non-equity. And it was like, put out a breakdown, get submissions, request self-tapes. We usually like to give actors, honestly, as much time as possible. For commercials, our rule is at least 24 hours. And that's honestly usually because the commercial shoots in 2 or 3 days and we just have to do it that fast. For theater, I really like to give people, 4 or 5 days to get their self tapes together. Then we collect the self tapes. We watch all the self tapes. We might say, "Ooh, I really love this person, but the song they sang wasn't right. So I'm going to go back to their agent and say we need to get a new song from them." We make tweaks like that. We don't just send all the self tapes we get onto our team. We're really curating those and sending the ones that we really feel strongly about, giving back notes, getting retapes, etc. We do that for TV shows too. I think people are surprised to learn that we watch the hundreds of self-tapes that we request, and we, send out notes. We ask for retapes before we select, who of those we're going to send on to the creative team. And then it depends, in a theater project, the next step would usually be the creative team viewing all of the equity submissions, those call submissions, and then all of the self-tapes, and then them giving us a callback list of, okay, here's all the people we liked and we want to see at callbacks. Sometimes that's, when I did Winnie the Pooh, I was casting like 6 tracks and we saw 2 or 3 people for each track. It was very limited. But for others...
Do people, when they're submitting self-tapes, adhere to the rules of how long they should be? Because I know when you're running the first round of auditions in person, you can be like, we're giving you this much time and we got to get you out of the room.
Right.
So if they're giving you some like 5-minute long thing, are you just like, I can watch part of it? Or
yeah, we say brief song. We don't really give specific like time limits to it. If someone goes too long, like we don't have to watch all of it, or we can't. That's something we can say where we're like, we don't need a 5-minute long song. Can you retape a minute long song and send it back to us? I mean, that would be an example of something that we might need to edit or fix before sending it along to their creative team. That's something we'd be looking out for.
Got it. Okay. I apologize. I derailed you back to where we were at. You were reviewing the tips.
Yeah, the timeline. So yeah, callbacks, it depends on, like I said, Winnie the Pooh, it was, really right in the height of COVID, but we had to do in-person auditions. So it was like, this is going to be as few as possible to make this work. So it was 2 or 3 people were called back for each track. For something like personality that's coming up, I think it would probably be 10 to 15 people called back per track if we have, that many options. For a TV show, I think our goal is usually to see about 20 people per role. Between self-tapes and in person. And then honestly, we'd probably cut it down to 8 or less that we're sending on to the creative team.
Okay.
Sometimes 2 or 3, if those are the 2 or 3 we feel really strongly about. It really does depend. There's no hard and fast rules. Even within one TV show, like callbacks for The Bear, it might be like, we sent you 8 choices for this role, and for this role, we really only feel like we have 2, and that's on us to decide, and to stand behind.
Very cool. Yeah, the numbers have gone up so much for TV, it seems, in the last few years. It's just astounding, which is great.
And I think that's because of self-taping and Zooming. Like, when we were doing, I am thinking about Southside and Shining Girls, it was kind of like, okay, let's aim to see 8 to 10 on Zoom and have 8 to 10 self-tape. And then that's mix and match. It's like, oh, but if someone would prefer to Zoom than self-tape, then like swap them. That was just kind of random. But yeah, I mean, because we're able to see more self-tapes, then physically we're able to just accommodate in the room. I do think we have bumped up those numbers, and we consider more people than we might have before. Now, remember, I started with them during COVID, during virtual. So this is all my experience. But yeah, that's my experience so far.
Very cool. All right, so let's open this up to some questions here. If people have some questions, you can throw them in the chat, and I'll try to read them and keep this going along. I have a question right here. Is there a preference on if the slate goes before or after the self-tape takes? From Lynn Solar asks. Or do you guys
I'd say 75% of the time, our preference is to have it first. Now, every now and then, I don't know which show this was. It might have been The Bear. I think our director said, can we put oh no, it was our Marvel show. It was Ironheart. They specifically said to have slates go at the end. So it is really actually our preference if you send it in 2 different files, because then we can put it in the right order. If it's at the end and we usually have it at the beginning, we might just leave it that way. But if it's something like the Marvel where they specifically requested that, we're going to go in, edit it, split it into 2 clips, and then put it at the end. So again, every answer to every question is it depends. But in this case, the way you help yourself there is you send it in 2 separate files.
And typically, if it's a TV show and it's a small role, like 1 line, 2 lines, are you having people do a couple takes?
Yeah, I would say at least, especially if it's a 1-liner, at least 2 takes. And this sounds so obvious, but then they should be different. People send us takes of 1 line that are exactly the same, and we're like, well, that defeated the purpose. But yeah, I'd say go ahead and throw 2 takes, even 3 takes in there. If you split those up, we can then choose our favorite one, or we can say send all 3. But it is very nice when you send us individual files of each take and you label them take 1, take 2, take 3. All 4 of us will sit together and watch and decide which take we like the most and get rid of 1 or 2 others, sometimes. So you're making our job a lot easier if it's just as simple as like, let's get rid of this one and move this one to the top.
Do you see the notes that come along with those on casting networks or on Actors Access at all? Do people use that note thing at all?
We see notes that seem to come from the agents. Like we'll have a note in there that's about availability.
Okay.
So I feel like there's a way for actors to send a note that only goes to their agent. However, I have every now and then seen a note that was clearly worded towards the agent that then we see that's about availability. But in my brain, I'm like, well, maybe the agent just copied and pasted it and sent it to us,
You mean Actors Access doesn't work perfectly?
I know, right?
Oh my gosh.
And casting networks, even, it's changing all the time. It's like, I mean, they're adding new features that are often trying to help us, but it's like, oh, now we have this new box and this new, notes thing. And, so, but yeah, we can see those and we go through those because usually we think that's going to be something about availability that we would like to catch ahead of time before like putting you on check avail and then learning like, oh, you're not available one of the shoot days,
Yeah. Caroline Hendricks has a question, super specific question. That's okay. You can have super specific questions. Is it okay to insert so instead of doing hand slate live, can we insert a picture of our hands or a picture of a full body slate if they're not able to get them in frame or what it might be while the video is rolling?
Totally. And I feel like our self-tape instructions usually say include a photo or clip of your full body slate if possible. Yeah. We know that actually doing a full body clip, like you said, is like, the worst part of your audition process. So yeah, just have a full body photo that you just throw in there. Same with hands, that's fine. Often in our callbacks, we then do the full body and the hands over again. So, we feel like then we're getting it live. We're making sure that, yes, those are actually your hands and all of that.
Yeah. Let me see. I just lost my. Does being out of town factor in negatively if you're willing to work as a Chicago local hire or as a Chicago local hire? And this says specifically just about 2 hours out of town, like 2 or 3. I feel like that's still totally Chicago, right?
Yeah, I think that doesn't factor in negatively. Sometimes it is important to the team that you are there for an in-person callback. So it is a little frustrating if we don't know that ahead of time. We send you an appointment for an in-person callback, and then it's like, oh no, they're out of town. Can they Zoom? And it's like, well, no, this one is specifically in person for a reason. In this case, it sounds like 2 hours out of town. Maybe you'd be willing to drive in for that callback. No, it doesn't bother us as long as you truly are willing to work as a Chicago local hire, meaning you are going to take the job, description that was in the breakdown. What happens that's frustrating is if then your agent is trying to then negotiate for more money because you're coming in from out of town. And it's like, well, no, this is a Chicago local job. So, that's the part that then would say, no, we're just going to go to someone who is actually local. But no, 2 hours sounds great to me.
And this easy question, does PR casting use casting networks or Actors Access?
We largely use casting networks, I'd say 75% of the time. And that is mostly because it has the option for agents and or actors to upload those self-tapes directly. We, for a long time, did a system where we did our submissions through Breakdown Express, so that we didn't send out the request that way. We emailed out self-tape requests, and then it was basically hiring a full day freelance person just uploading those tapes to casting networks. It was just taking so much time. So that's why we tried to integrate, and that's why we're mostly on casting networks. Do we love casting networks? No, we do not, but it is, the best thing that's working for us, at least in that, the self-tape area right now.
Got it. And is Actors Access, that's just clunkier? Like if we can upload through the whatever it is, the EcoCast, then it's.
We just haven't done that yet. And maybe we just need to get more aware of how exactly that works, but we have not integrated how our breakdown, then an audition request, then go into EcoCast. We haven't made that work yet.
Got it. I've got a question from Robbie, who is from England. Would it be beneficial to I could rephrase it, but let me say how it says it. For commercials, would I be less likely to be booked based on an English accent, or would it be better to practice a Midwest accent here in America?
That's hard. It's going to be specific to the copy and the commercial. I would say if there's nothing specific that tells you this is a Midwestern person in the commercial, you would use your English accent. You might want to just give us a take of American accent just in case that's really important to the client and that's really how they see it. In this case, I think what I would tell you to do is if you got an audition for a commercial that shoots in Chicago, I would send us one take in your natural accent and one take in an American accent just to kind of cut that off at the pass. You just might get, you might send your take with an English accent and they don't take the extra step to say, well, can he do an American accent? We should assume you can, but it might just be easier to move on,
Yeah. Do you have any book recommendations that just popped up?
Oh, that's so lovely. I just read, I'm trying to recall her name, but it's Daisy Jones and the Six, and then Malibu Rising and the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. If anyone out there knows these books, they're all by the same author, and there's characters that kind of find their way into all of the books. There's an Amazon Prime series coming out next year of Daisy Jones and the Six that I'm super excited about. So those are the three I think I've read most recently. And she just had a fourth one come out that I'm hoping to read during kind of the holiday break when things are a little quieter. I have a 2.5-year-old, so I used to read a lot. Don't find as much time for reading now. My husband and I usually watch one episode of television before going to bed at night, and that's about it.
So my book recommendations are Room on the Broom, Prince Cinders.
Okay.
I can't think of any other ones.
So these are kids' books.
We love the Rainbow Fish. Yes, these are for you. You must get Room on the Broom, especially around Halloween time.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Uh,
she really likes Curious George. We're doing a lot of like Christmas books right now. So yeah, it's a lot of kids books we're reading to her.
Yeah, I love a good rhyme. Love a good rhyming book, and those. Yeah, I forget what the author's name is. She's marvelous, just marvelous. But back to acting. What is one myth or thing that actors seem to believe to be true that you wish they knew was just not true?
Yeah, I thought of this earlier when you said kind of like there's nothing you could do to be so terrible that we'd never see you again. When I first started in casting in New York, there was kind of a rumor about another big casting office in town, not mine, but like that they had a 3-strike rule. And if you had 3 bad auditions for them, they'd never call you in again. And it took about a year of working at Terra's and going through auditions that I was like, oh, there's no way there could be a 3-strike rule. We wouldn't have any actors to see. Like every actor has 3 bad auditions. You can't then just like say like, nope, we're done with them. And I just thought that was hilarious. I just think that it's actually hilarious that like, it's just not true that there would be really anything you could do that would like be like, no, we are never seeing them again. Like if then something comes up and you are the right person and the right actor to see for it, that's our job. We're going to bring you in. It's there are things, but they're much more egregious than probably actors think they would be.
Than you could ever imagine. Yes, there's definitely stories that you have that are like, yeah, I can't believe, yeah, but it's so far-fetched. Yeah. That's
And
right.
I think, and you guys probably all hear this and then you don't believe it because you don't feel it in the room all the time, but like truly the casting people are the people in the room that are on your side because we want you to get the job. If you book the job, then we did our job, so we are absolutely rooting for you. And, sometimes you might not always feel that from us because like we're thinking of a million different things and we're running behind and we're trying to like make sure we get the footage right and everything. But like, we absolutely are rooting for you and only want to see you succeed. There's no, you have
Right.
to come in and prove yourself or, it's really, it hopefully should feel a lot more supportive than that.
But everybody feels like it's like you're going in for the math exam, and you can get it right or get it wrong, but you're going in to collaborate with the casting person to create something together. And I think actors don't realize that an audition is an environment where they create something with the casting director, and getting to know all of you individuals and work with people to play around can be just such a fun part of your day. Yeah.
Oh, and it's so exciting for us to work with an actor who is excited to get our direction or is excited to work with us. And, that it feels like a collaborative back and forth. And we do feel the actors who are kind of like, I don't need your direction. I already know what I'm doing with this, or, a little put off by that. And it's like, oh no, it is our job to give you direction and kind of, try and get you towards the right, path.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty, we have to wrap this up pretty darn quickly here. I do think somebody had asked a question, which I thought was interesting that we don't normally get. I might have read it wrong, but how if you wanted to become a casting director or associate or assistant, what would that be like? How would you go getting started into that?
Yeah, and I think the great thing in regards to this question that I have found is very different here in Chicago than in New York is that you reach out to casting offices that and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Would you ever need an intern? Could I do coffee runs and sit in on auditions, at some point? And, in New York, we were very much like, if you are a performer, you're a performer. If you are a casting person, you're a casting person, and the worlds don't cross. Here, it's much more like, oh yeah, you want to sit in on an audition? You want to even sit in on a virtual audition and help us out and upload some tapes? Like, let's do it. I mean, they're a lot more open to that here. I don't think that they're too worried about any sort of conflict of interest, especially if like you're coming from a good place of just like, I would love to know what a typical day is like for you guys. And could I sit in and, maybe in turn help you out? And that will include like doing coffee runs and making copies and boring things like that. But hopefully also, getting some insight into the casting procedures and all that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, great. Thank you. This went super, super fast. So we're going to wrap up the live feed on YouTube. And if you're in the practice, hang on to the meeting still, and we will pop in and let your pictures come on board. But thank you for joining us, everybody out there. We actually have another one of these coming up in, I think, less than a week and a half. I think we'll throw out an announcement on that on Monday. So stay tuned and hit the subscribe button. I don't know what that does for us, but it's a fun thing. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next time.
Bye.
All righty. So the public is gone. Thank you. Yes. If you want to take a break,